Good evening and welcome to Ayman. I'm Michael Steele in for Ayman Maudine. Tonight, we're covering the three big stories affecting you and the country, starting with the future of women's health in a post-Roe world and the other major Supreme Court ruling this week overturning a century-old gun law. Plus, Trump corruption reaches new levels, what we learned from this latest January 6th hearing. Let's get started. The Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, reversing nearly half a century of legal precedent and ending American women's constitutional right to abortion. Justice Samuel Alito, penning the majority opinion joined by four other conservative justices, held that, quote, the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overturned. Even Chief Justice Roberts dissented from overturning Roe, saying the court was going too far. However, he sided with the conservatives on the case at hand, upholding Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban. Of course, overturning Roe will have an immediate impact on women across the country, particularly in 13 states with so-called trigger laws. Those states have already banned abortion or will in the coming days and weeks. The Guttmacher Institute estimates that in total, 26 states are certain or at the very least quite likely to ban abortion. The nationwide reaction has been immediate. Thousands gathered in cities and towns across the country to protest. This was the scene outside the Supreme Court today. Here's what it was like in Nashville and in St. Louis. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in her dissent, condemned the majority's decision, arguing that it suggests, quote, from the very moment of fertilization, a woman has no rights to speak of. And now, other rights granted under similar legal precedent are coming under the microscope, thanks in part to a concurring opinion from Justice Clarence Thomas, who suggested that rulings stopping states from criminalizing same-sex intimacy, banning gay marriage, and limiting access to contraception should also be, quote, reconsidered. In short, despite the fact that a draft of this opinion was leaked in May, and despite the fact that many knew this was coming, theory is different than practice, and we're only just beginning to understand the sheer magnitude of how this decision will reshape America. Joining me now are Joyce Vance, MSNBC legal analyst, former U.S. attorney, professor at the University of Alabama Law School, and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast, Sarah Wabello, legal director of the Human Rights Campaign, and Jennifer Burton, contributor to Washington Monthly. Joyce, let's start with you. What was your reaction to the legal reasoning that the justices set forth in this opinion?
We knew that this outcome was coming. That seemed to be preordained once we saw the Supreme Court stay hands-off on the Texas law that permitted vigilante justice. What I think is really shocking when we first saw the leaked draft opinion, and when you read this opinion, which is now the law in this country, is how results-oriented the jurisprudence the Supreme Court uses to reach the outcome that there's no constitutional protection for abortion is. Maybe the most shocking feature of the opinion, and I know you've seen this, Michael, is Justice Alito's reliance on a 17th century British jurisprudential expert, a man who ruled in cases where witches were hanged, a man who believed that it was not possible for a husband to rape his wife. And it's sort of this discredited, outmoded jurisprudence from an era where women had no rights that Justice Alito uses to condemn women today to a similar fate.
Sarah, how did you assess the justices' ruling here?
You know, when we're looking at this from the lens of the LGBTQ community, you know, the majority opinion goes out of its way to say that the decision to strike down Roe should not have an impact on any other case law, including the right to contraception, the right to same-sex sexual intimacy, and the right to marriage. However, you know, Justice Thomas is inviting challenges in the way that he frames up his concurrence. He essentially says that all of these laws are no longer valid in the way that the court has struck down the due process analysis. And he wants to see this court reevaluate each and every one of those decisions.
Jennifer, you came at this from a very different perspective, a personal one. You wrote a personal piece on abortion for Washington Monthly just before the decision. What did you say in that piece, and how, now that we have this ruling, how have your reflections come out on this? How do you see this right now?
Well, I wrote the piece because back in December, I took a friend from Texas to Planned Parenthood in Baltimore for an abortion. She was denied an abortion in Texas. So I took her, I spent the day with her at that Planned Parenthood. And as every hour went on, I just got more and more upset and outraged that a woman had to fly halfway across the country for a medical procedure that should just be status quo everywhere. And it made me reflect on my own abortion that I had when I was 40, a single mom with 2 kids. So I just think that this decision is so shameful and outrageous that I can't believe that we are going back to a time where we are going to have unsafe abortions all across this country. It's shameful.